Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Poorman. I am a developer advocate here at Salesforce. And today, in this episode, is our very first Recruiting for Good episode. And we want to talk in this episode about what Recruiting for Good is. So let me just give you the real boring basics. Recruiting for Good is a weekly live session where we're going to be working on building and establishing a Salesforce application. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the topic of that application will be recruiting. If you've ever used if you think way back when I was learning Salesforce in 2008 ish, we had this great book called the Workbook, and it worked through a company that was looking to build a recruiting application to find and manage applications and people who are applying, all that jazz. And we're going to be doing that same sort of use case, but with a 2021/2022 facelift, as it were. And with me through this project, but not appearing every week, we have a wonderful gentleman named Alastair Higginbottom. You want to say hi and introduce yourself?
Hi there, Kevin. How are you doing? Yeah, my name's Alastair. I work at Salesforce in a department called Q Branch, and I manage how we operationalize innovation as part of the employee experience. I have a key passion in equality, diversity, and diverse hiring.
That's cool. Now, if anybody was wondering, it has not been lost on me that a man named Alastair, who lives in England, runs Q Branch, or is part of Q Branch, I'll say. It's the whole thing there. It just makes you the most British person I know. It's good to meet you, and I met you a couple weeks ago. We've been talking about this. Alistair's role through this is to help us be sort of the voice of the business. He's going to act as our product owner, our product manager. So we'll be having periodic check-ins with Alistair and saying, "Hey, look, this is what we built. Is this what you had in mind?" And Alistair will inevitably go, "No." Or, yeah, no, that's exactly what I had in mind. And so as we talk about building features and we build them out, we're going to check back with him and see if we can get his sign off on it, basically. So if you've ever done application development in sort of an agile fashion, that's what we're going to be trying to do open in front of everyone every week, Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Her Majesty's time, and 10 a.m. Pacific. Now, these will also be available on YouTube, and as we go through building out this whole thing, feel free to check in and leave comments on the YouTube videos. We also have this Quip doc that you see here in front of you, and this Quip doc is shared publicly, so anyone who has the link can view it, and I will get that out in a tweet here, so you can go in and you can put in, like, I've got some concerns or questions about this here or that. But at Salesforce, when we start to do a project, one of the very first things we do is sort of build out the V2 MOM. You know, if you've never heard of a V2 MOM, I think it's fairly unique to Salesforce. Is that a fair statement, Alistair?
Yeah, I think so. Although I know there are a lot of organizations starting to use it, especially in the nonprofit and education sector.
That's cool. But I think it started with Salesforce. Is that?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
it
it's
started with
Benioff.
Salesforce. With Benioff, in fact. So what we're going to do today in this episode is we're going to talk about we're going to build out the V2 MOM for our recruiting app. Now, this is not when we talk about I need the recruiting app to, show me resumes. That's sort of feature scoping that we're going to do later. Part of what we want to do with this application is show you from the very beginning of the idea all the way through the execution and building how we go about building these applications, how we build applications. And so as we go through the weeks, we're going to have different guests and they're going to talk to us about different aspects of application development. For instance, we're going to get our architect advocate team on here, and they're going to help us architect and ask the questions that architects ask and build out diagrams of what we are building and how we're building it, and how these pieces interact. We'll get together with people from the ISV team because our ultimate goal is to have a package that's ready for ISV security review. And so we'll bring them in. We'll bring in Alastair to be our product owner and ask questions and grill us and give us a hard time. But we'll also go through any number of other teams that you might expect to have. So we might get legal to check in with us and say, you're storing information about people who are applying. How are you going to safely manage that in accordance with all the rules and regulations? And so each of these episodes, that's not going to necessarily be, okay, we're going to code on this today. It's going to be a bunch of episodes about how do we build this app, why do we build it this way, and what is the best way to do it long term. So our goal here is for sustainable development, not quick development. Sustainable development is development that you can go in and refactor as you need, as your product grows. And to start all of this off, we're going to work on our V2 Mom for creating for good. So, Alastair, do you want to sort of give us a dime tour of what a V2 Mom is?
Yeah, sure. So the V2 Mom is it can be used one of two ways. One, we use it as a strategic alignment tool, which enables us to see internally within Salesforce how we can impact and how our work rolls up to the overall vision of the company. So it starts with the CEO and rolls all the way down to even to lowly people like me. And so I can always see how my work is supporting the overall goals. The second way you can use the V2 Mom, which we typically use it in a more ad hoc way, but I think is pretty much everywhere across the business, in technical, creative, or even business problem solving, is to use it as a project plan. And the reason why it's such a powerful project plan, I think, is because it starts with where you're going to get to. It's a forward-looking statement of, it really lays out the intent, I think, of where the place that you're going to stop, the place where you're going to get to within a defined period of time is your vision. God, it sounded like I read that last bit. I didn't, I promise.
Yeah, no, that was really well done. So I'm just putting some of your notes there. I've been quoting you and putting this in our document. This is a Quip document. If you've never used Quip, this is we talk about it as a product. Quip is a great product. It's kind of hard to describe because it shifts around your understandings of what documents are. But in a Quip document, it's a living document. There's a conversation over here on the side, and you can start to see, like, I made changes here, and it shows you in green what those changes are. And you can share these out and work with them live with other people. So what I was doing here is saying this document is available at, and oh no, it gave me a fancy schmancy link here. I want the copy the link, see if this works. Nope. Okay. I was trying to get the link there so people could join us in the Quip document, but we'll get that in here in a little bit. So in our V2 Mom, you told us what it is and what we do with it. What does V2 Mom actually stand for? Because honestly, it sounds like a bit of a made-up thing.
Yes. So we've got a vision and we've got values, V2. And then we've got methods, measures, and obstacles.
Now, is it methods, measures, and obstacles, and they just say MOM because that makes for nice English? Or as we actually say methods, obstacles, measures?
Yes.
Okay.
There we go.
So we're going to build out the V2 Mom for this, and I'm going to make these all, let's make these bigger. These are probably, what, heading 2s? Yeah, there we go. So on our vision, and we get to put whatever we want here. When you're creating your V2 Mom, there's not like there's generally not a formula for this, right?
Yeah, I think personally I like to sort of throw everything in and then take time sort of honing the vision down, especially if you're working in a team. It's good to be able to put as much into this vision initially, almost like a sort of a mini mind map, and then hone it down. And I think you can find very quickly that you get to a powerful forward-looking statement quite quickly this way.
Yeah, one of the things I like to keep in mind when I'm doing these, especially for an internal project is I'll go in there and I'll put everything I can possibly think of in this vision, and then over time, as I'm shopping it around to possible people who would want to help or colleagues, that sort of thing, I try to edit and cut away as much of it as possible. And so when I start off, my vision ends up being like 2 paragraphs long, and when I'm done, I've got something that I can, roughly memorize and give in an elevator pitch. So when we started off doing this recruiting for good project, some of the things that we talked about were a recruiting app that is focused on diversity, equality, and inclusivity. Got some $10 words here today. Inclusivity, did I spell it right? A recruiting app that's focused on diversity, equality, inclusivity, that helps Salesforce customers. Helps customers. How do I want to phrase this? Feel free to rescue me whenever you get an idea.
No, I was enjoying it too much. So I think that it provides users with a method and a vocabulary to drive equal and inclusive hiring. I think it offers an opportunity for transparency and standardization across multiple organizations.
I think that's good. Standardization is a big one. We want something that is going to be fairly flexible. Like, while we have an idea in our head about what the hiring process should look like, that doesn't necessarily have to be applied to everyone. So we want something that is flexible for the flexible hiring path.
I guess that's perhaps where this is, we were talking about trimming this back down, and this is where it's a great point that things need to be flexible to whoever needs to use them. So perhaps then that's where you introduce the concept of value, so how you're going to work. So then all of a sudden standardization could perhaps become like the filter through which you see things. So there's a certain, that's the theme that runs through it, but then the what of the thing could be that it's flexible.
I like that. I'm trying to figure out how to word that. Now, you talked about shifting this down to values. Are you saying that we would have a value of flexibility?
I was saying more the other way around. Flexibility would be like in the vision, because it needs to be flexible to whatever the user needs. Mm-hmm. But then the standardization would be the value of, so across sectors, there's this framework of, it could be equivalency of vocabulary, it could be a standardization of terms. So we are putting you through a paper sift, and then we're inviting you to an interview, and then we are going to invite you to a panel interview. And so whoever you're hiring is going to recognize those terms, and there'll be a state of parity of what those things mean. But how many interviews and how many panel interviews you need to submit is the flexibility.
Okay. And steps, but their order, well, leave that there as a values. When I try to come up with values, I try to come up with something that I can give as a bullet point, because I want them to be super clear and sort of stand on their own. I know that's not the only way to do it. I'll put it that way. Lots of people have different understandings of values, but I like to say something as quickly and succinctly as possible and let it stand on its own. And I try to be as unambiguous as possible. So when we talk about standardization of vocabulary and steps, that's kind of where I would want to stop, because that sort of standardization is a thing that makes sense to me. There's no ambiguity there. We're going to have a vocabulary. We're going to stick to it throughout the app. We're going to have steps, etc. Typically, though, our vision is a narrative. So this recruiting app is the. I mean, like we can create a goofy one as a framework. So The recruiting for good app is the preeminent recruiting and hiring tool on the App Exchange, and has a dedicated focus on diversity, equality, and inclusivity, providing.
I think.
Yep, go ahead.
I think that the focus of the app, we accept is going to be diversity and equality. But I think the real value of whether or not we've been successful is if it enables users to hire with diversity, equality, and inclusivity. Because you can have a tool that it's designed to do that, but whether or not it actually helps users do it is the state you need to get to, isn't it?
So enabling users to equitably hire new talent.
Yeah.
We were just having a conversation ahead of this time about what our vocabulary would be regarding the people who are applying for jobs. Would they be talent, or Alastair, you've got a background in the nonprofit space, and so young people is a phrase that comes up there. We'll probably bounce around on a few of them until we've narrowed down our vocabulary. But since that's not a value, it's something we're going to have to do. But we talk about the people who are looking to get a new job here at our company, or at the company using this, I should say. So we're going to equitably hire new talent. Okay, and let's see. I mean, that's a nice, short, succinct one. We haven't talked about. We can move the diversity, equality, and inclusivity down to values, right?
Yeah.
Fosters and encourages. Well, that's redundant. Encourages diverse, equitable, and inclusive hiring practices. So we can move that one down there. It's a recruiting app. So provides users with the method and vocabulary to drive. That's redundant as well, I think. I mean, this is intentionally sort of a simple use case. Now we'll get into, does it do X, Y, or Z feature-wise when we get into the sort of scoping of things and what features we're going to build, and have the architects guide us through asking those questions. This is the kind of time, though, where we start asking, I don't know, almost the philosophical questions about why we're doing things and doing them this way. So we want to offer transparency and standardization throughout the process. And we have a flexible hiring path. So I'm not totally sold on that being a completed vision, but let's try and tackle some of these other ones here. We talk about having the diverse, equitable, inclusive hiring practices. We want to talk about our value is to be transparent.
Yeah, I think so.
Transparency.
I think it's a huge barrier to talent, especially talent from non-traditional backgrounds and from first generation of people who are coming out of university, and a lot of these target groups that this app will be actively looking to enable. Ambiguity. It's your point already about how you write VT-mums, but ambiguity within the process, and it kills engagement. If you were coming into a position where you already don't feel comfortable or you don't feel confident, don't necessarily feel a sense of belonging, having any kind of ambiguity or hidden steps, hidden ways in, they're the things that really sort of stop trust from being built within the process, I think.
Do we want to include trust as a value here? So let me back up. One of the things about V2MOMs inside Salesforce is if trust isn't your number one value, you did it wrong, basically. And so, because we talk at Salesforce that trust is our number one value, and we have a lot of reasons for that. But it is kind of a at this point a thing that is automatic. We always talk about how is it that this project is going to help build trust between, if it's an internal project, Salesforce and our customers. In this case, we want to ask, how is it going to build trust between the applicant and the company, the hiring company? So let me go back up here. I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I'm gonna say trust, and between the hiring company and the applying talent, put it that way. We really want to encourage and build up that trust. I don't know about you. I've had some really weird. I don't know that I'm going to say I'd have really bad examples with interviewing, but that may also be luck of the draw, for lack of a better term. But it seems inevitable that sooner or later sometime in your life you're going to apply for a job, and then you'll just never hear back at all.
I think people again, going to transparency and trust. I think that firstly, you and I probably haven't had bad examples because we perhaps look like the people that people would expect to hire into a tech company, which probably is part of the issue. I do think that that trust comes from a two-way situation where we've talked about standardization, but I think sort of ensuring the voice of the talent is heard. And I was doing some research recently, and the quote I got, I'm just going to quote it verbatim, is talent needs to learn to speak the language of business, but business rarely learns to speak back, which I thought was a pretty impressive quote from quite a young person, but it was someone that had really felt that it was a one-way street, and you can't build a trusting relationship if there is no relationship. And it doesn't have to be bad experiences of recruiting. It's unpredictable. I've recently been through a recruitment process where I didn't know I was actually being interviewed, and I'm a confident and I felt very comfortable having the conversations I was having, but I mightn't have done.
Right.
And so, it all worked out well. But as I say, it doesn't need to be an unpleasant part of it. But if someone was new into that space or hadn't felt comfortable, then that's where it comes back to that transparency again, doesn't it? And that how to build trust rather than actively erode it.
I like that. What other values are you thinking of at this point? And it could be that this is the sum total, because we can always go back and add and tweak this document.
I always like with values to make them the highest order of thing I can.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like you say, reduce any ambiguity and making sure that everything that we might want to put into this can roll up into one of these buckets. So I keep them as high a level as possible, I think.
I like it. So once we have our vision and our values, and I'm not sure we're done with either one of those, but we're going to move on here so that we can keep talking about these. The next one up we have is methods, and this is generally a bulleted list. And the way it works at Salesforce is the first V2 mom to be published in any given time period is always the CEO's. And then what he does is he or she does is they turn around and they delegate the methods to their directs. So, level 2 will get, the Mark's directs will get, okay, you're going to handle method 1, you're going to handle method 2, and then they go on and they build out their own V2 mom with a focus on their vision matching the sort of method or the area of work that they were given in the method. And so the way that ends up for people like me, and I'm assuming you, Alastair, is will be our managers will come to us to the team and say, okay, this is our our team V2Mom. It's published by our manager, and they'll go through everything. And then sooner or later, they'll be like, okay, and Kevin, I want you to work on method 2. And method 2 could be everything from something as succinct as go build a recruiting app to a bit more broad, like we want to engage our developers in YouTube or something like that. But it sort of, that's how things sort of roll down and are assigned. You start off with the sort of CEO and the whole company V2Mom, and then those methods get assigned down into various departments and to various people. Is that a succinct? Is that a good way of describing that?
Yeah, definitely. And as I said in the introduction to it, I think that description really shows how, if you turn that process around, every employee can see how through their work, their teams work, their managers work, all the way up through to the company-wide V2Mom. And when you've got a company of 75,000 people now, it's a great way of connecting to people. And we also keep it public. I think that's quite an important piece internally, how we use it. So everyone can view everybody's V2Mom. So I can go and see, what's my EVP thinking for this year? Or I can see people within my team, Bob's picked this up and this is how he sees it, and then that really helps me place my own work within the context of the team or the broader department.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of the V2Mom, and I mean, I've worked at previous companies and they've had a similar like top down, we're going to do this and delegate things out, but it's never been this clear, and it's never been a two-way path where I could, okay, the CEO said this, and then the vice president said this, and then my manager said this, and then I'm doing this. But I can also go, okay, I'm doing this, and I think that that's going to fulfill my manager's method 2, which fulfills his manager's method 3, so on and so forth. I really enjoy that back and forth nature of it. And I also want to call out, we haven't really mentioned this, but one of the things that is really important with V2Moms is they are periodically refreshed. So every year, at the beginning of our business year, we write new V2Moms. But periodically through the year, we refresh our V2Moms. We go through and we're like, okay, I did that already, or we're still doing this. Or as it turns out, that's not really a thing because that project was canceled, so I don't need to do that one. Let me find something else to put in there. So we're going to revisit this document a lot. But that doesn't help us at all for creating methods. So when you think about methods for recruiting for Good App, Alastair, what kinds of things come to mind?
So I like to break the first 3 parts of the V2Mom, copy Mr. Simon Sinek with the why, how, and what. And so I always see the methods as there's a bit more of the what, and I don't mean specific functionality, but sort of if we've got values as buckets, then the methods are the things that will fit in each of those buckets. So, for me, I think a really important thing is a bit more of a conceptual one, is around, I think we've got the voice of the talent is heard. So probably finding a channel or functionality where we can meet talent where it's at. I recognise I didn't say that very well. But again, it could almost be pulling it straight down from the vision. It's sort of, how do we operationalize ensuring the voice of the people, talent is heard, and how do we operationalize functionality to be relevant and to be accessible.
So I like what you said there. I think I'm following along, but that was a bit of buzzword bingo. So let's back up here and say, when you talk about operationalize, that sort of thing, what does you mean there?
So we've got a value of, sorry, it's very small. I'm going to go on to the actual quip so I can see. So we've got the value of, it didn't refresh, ensuring the voice of talent is heard.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what it says, isn't it? Yep. So that's very nice and highfalutin. The methods are how you start to bring that to life, or what you're going to do to bring that to life. So operationalize in this instance would be, what do you actually need to deliver through through your use case or through your app that will ensure the voice of the talent is heard? So is it, and build an understanding of the channels of engaging diverse talent? Is it making sure, it could be more specific, and I suspect this will probably be a measure, but it's like, do you invest in reaching people through video because that's a more inclusive way of reaching people in diverse hiring? And see what I mean? So you'd be starting to bring to life some of the what that delivers on the how.
Yeah, I think we've talked a little bit about some of this here before, and about shaping this and making this a unique product that is distinctly Salesforce based. And one of the things we talked about was ensuring that job descriptions were posted as V2 moms, like using this format for a job description. So I think that is a thing we want to put in the methods. Job recs as V2 mom. But I also want to say, didn't we talk a little bit, or how do you think it would work if we, and everyone's used the recruiting thing where you go and you're like, all right, now copy paste your resume in here. What if instead of doing that, or a resume or a CV, we encourage people to write V2 moms as applicants?
Yeah, I think so. I've taught the V2 mom, or enabled Salesforce volunteers to teach the V2 mom as a personal planning tool to young people in probably 30 different countries now. We've reached thousands of them, and I think the thing that I've always seen is that moment of empowerment and clarity when someone who is looking down the barrel of their future going, can all of a sudden start thinking about, where are they going to be within a set given, a given time?
Where are you going to be in 5 years? Where are you going to be in 3 years?
Yeah. It's not where do I want to go, which is good. That's aspirational. Where will I be? It's a statement of intent, and I think that is a really powerful way. If you're someone, the key part of our research into underserved talent is the lack of confidence and the lack of feeling like they belong. Start off your interaction with that person with a powerful, powerful statement of intent of where they are going to be. Because once you can say, this is where I'm going to be, the brilliance of the V2 mom is it helps you do that. It's like, great, you're going to be there, cool. So how are you going to get there? And you obviously can keep firing in information, and it kind of after a while starts to not write itself, because as we're seeing, it's not as simple as that. But the path becomes a lot clearer. And again, that we'll cover obstacles in a minute. But from a personal planning perspective, how powerful to have someone tell you, this is where I'm going to get, Mr. Recruiter. This is where I'm going to get, and you can come and join me on that journey, or you can not pass your shout, but this is where I'm going. They tell you their values and their methods, but they're also saying, these are the things that are going to stop me. And then instantly that changes the conversation into the recruiter seeing where this person wants to go, seeing their ambition, thinking, hey, we want some of that in our that clarity of purpose in our organization. What's going to stop them? Where can we support that? And that sounds a bit fluffy, but it's definitely been the case that where we have taught young people to be able to advocate for themselves using various different tools, that's been good. Where we've been able to teach them to advocate for themselves on the platform of having a strong vision for the future, it's been transformative for them.
Okay, so we want to find a way to enable, we want to use your word, operationalize that transformational understanding of self in terms of relation to a job. So I've gotten down here in our methods, job recs is V2 moms, and then I have applicant V2 mom. where will the applicant be rather than where does the applicant want to be.
Just for the sake of translation, what's a job rec?
A job rec is a job posting.
Okay, got your job description.
Job
Super.
description.
There we go.
Posting.
Looks like we could do with some transparency and standardization there.
Exactly. Hey, we got some people chiming in the chat. I got Dev Zach from Paris. Hello, Zach. And Rahul doesn't say where they're from, but good to see you here. And Gaju is here as well. So it's always good to see people tuning in. Again, as a reminder, we're talking about what this Recruiting for Good project is. It's every Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Her Majesty's time, or 10 a.m. Pacific time, and we're going to be building out a application on the Salesforce platform to do recruiting, but we're going to do so in a way that promotes diversity, equality, and inclusivity. So speaking of which, somewhere about in this methods, we should talk about how we want to encourage those practices of diversity, equality, and inclusivity. And I have sort of a high-level overview of a high-level idea of what I want that to look like, but I don't necessarily have the mechanics of it worked out. One of the things that I think we should do is provide a double-blind mechanism that prevents users from viewing viewing demographic data of applicants and etc. We'll stop it there. And what I mean by this is, so if I'm a hiring manager and the recruiter of our company has given me 10 resumes to look at this point in this, I don't need to know their name, their gender, their location, what university they went to, etc. What I need to know is where do they want to be, or where will they be, and what kinds of skills that they have. And if we have a system in place where we can present, as the recruiter, we can say, okay, go look at these 10 records to a hiring manager, and the hiring manager can go in there and evaluate their interest in an applicant based strictly on what that applicant has written, what the voice of the applicant is about their own skills and experience. Then we've taken out as best we can any sort of overlay of privilege or assumptions and that sort of thing that have been built in.
Yeah.
Now, it's not going to be perfect, but I think it's a good step. And we're gonna have to think through how we want to do this double-blind mechanism when it comes to the point where, okay, now I'm ready to interview someone, because then you're gonna see all that information for yourself.
I wonder if the provided double-blind is almost at the level of a measure, like it's a very specific thing, and the method would be around reducing potential bias and almost circumventing existing bias. So I think we have to, when we look at recruiting, take a couple of things as orthodoxies, and one that it's inherently biased because it's people talking to people. And if we know one thing, it's that bias persists even unconsciously. And so it's not just at that point of the demographic, but it's the words that are used. So we've produced for young people completing a personal plan using the V2 Mom. We actually call it the V2 Me. And thinking about reducing bias, you can do things like use pick lists where, and again, this talks to transparency and standardization. You have a pick list of values that the young person can advocate for themselves with. So Salesforce, for example, has a list of 48 values that we all use. I actually have them, because I'm a good employee, sitting here on my desk in playing card format. And they're really useful in writing a V2 Mom. But what that would give you is an opportunity to say, So we've gone very specific, but I'm just trying to show that there's more than just the double blind.
Mm-hmm.
The language you use and how people access that language. So we're talking about diversity, but I wonder if we're thinking about equal access in terms of neurodiverse, those that are visually impaired. So actually, specifically having a pick list of set values gives you that equivalency. It gives you the opportunity that they could hover over it and it will explain it in video format, or it'll come out in spoken word. And all of a sudden you're building in that equality of access and reducing, potential bias because of the vocabulary that you use. So those sorts of things would perhaps all fit under that same measure.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to write that. So I wrote down, I wrote down reducing potential bias by hiding bias-forming information.
Yeah, perfect.
And move the double blind thing down to a measure. And then we've got the drive vocabulary consistency with like form elements.
One thing that our research has shown us is that people lacking in confidence find it pretty much excruciating to advocate for themselves, and I'm sure you can notice that. So I think when I say advocate for themselves, I don't mean just sitting in a room saying I'm great, but I mean just at every stage. And our research has shown like the number one issue is lack of confidence, lack of belonging. I've mentioned it a couple of times. So I think reducing the burden of advocating for themselves would include vocabulary consistency with form elements, reducing the burden to the talent of advocating for themselves whilst maintaining the quality of insight it gives the recruiters, I think would be the method.
Yeah, again, I like every word you said there. I'm just trying to figure out how to write that down.
I think I'll write it.
You'll write it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, while you do that, I'm going to introduce the concept of an obstacle. So when I first was hired at Salesforce and I was writing my first V2 Mom, I was really concerned about what I was going to write down for obstacles because when you say obstacle to me, I think my street wasn't plowed and I can't get off my street because there's 6 inches of snow on it. It's a very one-off tactical thing to solve. But the obstacles that we've seen is they're much bigger than that. So like one of the obstacles we've had in my V2 Mom this past couple of years is so much of what my job does is personal. It's not necessarily one-to-one, but it's one-to-many, but it's always in person. And then we had a global pandemic, and it turns out that kind of thing is really difficult to do in a global pandemic. You can't just hop on a plane and fly somewhere to go give a talk when no one's having in-person meetings. So one of the obstacles we would do is one of the obstacles I have on mine is a way of saying, okay, look, I've got to find new channels of communicating with my developer audience. So when we talk about recruiting for good and recruiting that sort of thing, what kind of obstacles do we have that we know we need to work out or around or engineer around so that we can enable good customer outcomes? And one of the things that comes to my mind is actually something that Alastair just said. People who are lacking confidence are not great self-advocates. And so that is an obstacle I see to our mission here. Now you just put that up in methods. How do you feel about also putting it as an obstacle?
Yeah, I think it's existential, isn't it? If this solution doesn't empower people who are not feeling confident, or don't feel like they belong, don't feel like they have a right to be here, if it doesn't empower and enable them to advocate for themselves, then that's going to be a really significant problem if we are, to our vision, going to enable our users to hire more diversely.
So again, the trick in all of this is figuring out the right way to put it down so that it communicates to other people what we're talking about and doing. So when I think about obstacles here, you said that the number one issue facing, I'm going to say, you say young people, I'm going to say applicants, is lack of self-confidence. And another issue I think we're going to face is there is no standardized vocabulary for hiring. And this is really simple. It goes down to here in the United States, if I want to get a job, I write together a document, generally a single page, that lists and summarizes my education, experience, and skills. Now, here in the United States, we call that a resume. But in your neck of the woods, I think it goes by a different name, doesn't it?
Yeah, so we talk about a CV.
Yep.
And in the UK and Ireland, they're pretty typical, but then in every single state within Europe, they're very, very different and nuanced. And the thing with sort of CVs and advocating for yourself through a CV, then it's all talking about what you have done, not what you're going to do. And also, it doesn't really talk to who you are, how you work. It's all about stating facts that may or may not have relevance on your ability to do that job. So for myself, for example, I actually don't put my education on my CV, which wouldn't go down well in Germany, because if you don't follow the exact format, they won't even read it. Equally, France, very, very formulaic. So if you're from some kind of alternate route into business, so for myself, I left school at 16, and before joining Salesforce had been a hospital porter, a security guard, and a gardener, and joined Salesforce directly from being a landscape gardener for a children's charity. Well, if I'd put my education and then those three things down on a CV that was being paper sifted against very strict CV style, resume style criteria, that's not getting me anywhere. I took my education off my CV because anyone that hires me because of my education, I don't want to work for them. If their standards are that low. Whereas, thinking about how you enable people to really talk about themselves, you say there's no standardization, but there is. It's just not represented in a CV. There's competency-based questions are not new, but they are effective.
That's true.
Indicators of behavior are not new, and they are easy to, within this recruitment app, if we were taking it through to like interview stage, inclusive of running your interview on it, then it'd be very powerful to be drawing completely unbiased data, because you set forth competencies that you need to be able to do to your job, which means you can communicate those to your people in advance. And then you have indicators of that competency, which you can have in advance. So if you're hiring someone that's neurodiverse that needs to have time to work through the questions beforehand and understand how to map their experience to them, by having seen it and having time to do that,
exactly.
You can do that because you're going to say the same thing. And so, I think that the lack of standardization in vocabulary is a big deal, but also in the whole of the recruitment sector. I don't think it's necessarily, I know somebody saying throw it all out. That's just saying there are good things and there are bad things within recruitment processes, but many of the bad things disproportionately affect those that we are actively trying to hire with this tool.
Yep. And I guess part of what I mean by that is the vocabulary is, let's say you're hiring in Germany for a position in a company in the United States. The recruiter may put out there, I want your resume, and that may not be an immediately understood term, is what I was going for. It would be good to find a way to, in terms of in the measures, I'm jumping all around here, is to establish competencies for the role and the applicant.
So,
using pick
so
lists.
I think this sort of talks back to the power of values for the it's a new thing, but I think as the workforce is engaging younger and younger people, it's been shown that people want to work somewhere where they believe in it and where they are believed in through their values. And then when we're talking about experience, the traditional way of talking about experience can be quite rigid. And it's like, where do you do your internship? If you didn't do an internship, then you haven't got any experience. You haven't any work experience. Well, I developed a workshop to help refugee women do reflections, translate their experiences into business value, essentially, to put on their CVs. And we did that using the STAR technique. So there are techniques out there to do this. You just need to be told them.
I've never heard of the STAR technique.
So this would be situation, task, action, and result. And it's just a way of breaking down any experience to form this equivalency. So these women, for example, were saying, well, I've got nothing, I want to go for a secretarial role. I've got nothing on the job description. And it was like, oh, we need to ship exacting organizational skills or something, whatever that means. And so translate that. Well, they managed to get their entire family from Eritrea to the UK on €1,000.
Whoa.
You can't tell me they don't have organizational skills. They aren't resourceful. They aren't resilient. They aren't leaders. They aren't team players. They aren't amazing communicators and influencers to have achieved that.
Exactly.
They're showing great tenacity. Well, how do you enable people to draw that experience? And it's not through a CV, essentially,
right?
Because that's just not the way that the mindset of reviewing people, and that's where I sort of talk about inherent bias and not empowering and enabling people. It's sort of two sides of the same coin, I guess.
Writing down biases inherent to human communication.
And I think it's important there's no judgment in that statement.
Yeah.
It just is. People talk and we receive a huge amount of information, and our brains are clever and they shortcut it by making assumptions. And everyone does it. It's just, how do we remove ourselves from that if we're not going to be able to overcome that, or at least be aware and consciously act against those biases, which in of itself could then produce bias.
Yeah. I read this book a while back on how the brain works, and one of the sections of it was the brain. The human brain isn't geared towards precise, accurate calculations. It's geared towards taking in a bunch of information and making a really accurate prediction of things. And this is both really good because this enables us to, thousands of years ago, figure out and adapt to where to throw the spear so that it hits the stampeding animal, even though it's not standing still. But at the same time, this is also where we see movement in one side, or we see one thing, and then we assume that they're going to be over here, and that's the root of bias as well. In that we look for patterns. We're pattern recognizers, and we try to make as accurate an impression as possible, but we also don't fully think through it. It's subconscious. So I think this is inherent. This is a really big one. Bias is inherent to human communication. And so part of what we have to do is figure out how to get rid of those. And in the, I wrote down here, establish competencies for the role and for the applicant. And this is where I wrote in using pick lists, because your idea earlier about, these are your options, pick from these. Sort of levels the playing field. I need this in this role, and this person says they have it or not. And it's easier to advocate for yourself when you're selecting from a list of options, not putting in your own thoughts.
And it empowers recruiters as well. We've talked a lot about empowering talent, but I think that it's really important that people see the potential cost savings and increase in accuracy, because if you put out a job advert for an entry-level talent position in Salesforce in California, you're going to get hundreds and hundreds of applications on CVs where people are not, as we've discussed, advocating for themselves as effectively as they might. And you as a recruiter, or you as some bot written by people, are going to have to review those CVs where people aren't necessarily advocating for themselves very well, and make cuts based on quite arbitrary things. If you're a recruiter, I would almost guarantee the first thing you look at is where they went to college, what's the level of their education. Well, that Eritrean woman that got her family across Europe using these skills and nothing but $1,000 doesn't stand a chance. Me sitting here as this product owner with literally no education at all and a great history of making amazing landscape gardens doesn't stand a chance. So you as a recruiter miss out on the smaller facets of society and the unorthodox, and you also have to do an awful lot of reading to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because most of the people you get will be wholly inappropriate based on how they advocate for themselves. So to get to those 5 people you shortlist, you've got to go through a lot of processes. Whereas if you can enable people by you having clarity of what you want, you having the vocabulary to express what you want, you having the pick list to say, these are the things that people should be able to do, should think about, should care, this is how people should work. These are predefined lists. People can say, hey, I'm good at team building. What level? Beginner, intermediate, expert. Oh, I'm an expert at team building. And that could be because of my internship at Goldman Sachs, or it could have been because of getting my Eritrean family across Europe.
I really like that.
I'm getting a little puritanical now.
No. This is good.
Preaching.
This is good. This is good. And here's the reality of it. We're gonna have to take some of this conversation offline and keep talking about it as we work through this V2 Mom. I think we have a really great start, but we have 3 minutes left, and this is the point in time when I always ask the community who are in the chat if they've gotten any questions, comments, or snide remarks. And I haven't seen any questions, comments, or snide remarks yet. Dev Zach said, though, that it was a very helpful subject, and then gave me a good vibes emoji. So feeling good about that one. I just want to reiterate the basics of this, because if you're tuning in on YouTube afterwards or something like that, this is a ongoing series where we're going to be building a recruiting application. Our goal is to ultimately have something that is ready for security review as a Salesforce application, and we're working on doing this in a way that sort of shifts the understanding of what recruiting and hiring looks like, because we want to do so in a way that really enables diverse, equitable, and inclusive hiring. And so we've got our V2 Mom for this, which is sort of going to be our map of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we're doing it. And our next step is to talk about how do we start a project in Salesforce. And if you tune in next week, you're going to see Philippe Oziel, one of my colleagues on my team, and I, as we work through setting up a project, brand new project. We're going to set up CI, or continuous integration, and why you might want to do that, along with various tooling choices that you have available, and just sort of getting everything ready to go and to start on a nice foot when we actually start coding and building our project. We also have some work coming up with, we're going to have a hiring manager on to talk about what are they looking for when they go to look at resumes or to look at applicants. What kinds of things do they want drawn to their attention first? And then we're also going to be talking to the Office of Equality, hopefully, and they're the only ones who haven't gotten back to me yet. And we got a bunch of other people we're bringing on to talk about this. And finally, we're going to get into scoping this out. So we're going to write some user stories. As a applicant, I want to be able to apply for put in my V2 Me or my V2 Mom for myself, and match that against open positions, and say I want to apply for this one so that I can get a job. We're going to write those user stories, and then finally around the turn of the year, having put together our plan for this from beginning to end, putting together an architecture diagram and talking about all the architecture choices, all of this stuff is going to come together to where we start writing the actual application. And so I want to encourage you all to tune in next week at Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Her Majesty's time, and 10 a.m. Pacific. All around the world to be available. And if you can't tune in at that time, check us out on YouTube. They'll be posted there immediately following the actual live stream. You can always tune in and join us on the chat and give us a hard time. And as you come up with questions, comments, or snide remarks, feel free to reach out to us there. I'm going to tweet out this document here. Comments are on, so you can always leave me a comment there. But until then, thank you, Alastair, for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And we will see you all again next week.
Thank you.